Hi everyone, welcome back. I hope you're all taking care of yourselves and having a peaceful week. Today, we are diving into two separate, incredibly chilling cases from April 2000 that span completely different sides of the globe. Yet they are bound together by a terrifying, dark common denominator. They are stories about what happens when powerful individuals stand up against systemic corruption and how far those operating in the shadows will go to permanently silence the truth. Our first story takes us to the vibrant but politically volatile landscape of Port-au-Prince, Haiti. To the citizens of this island nation, one voice stood as a towering, fearless beacon of democracy and free speech: Jean Dominique. Jean was an extraordinary, brilliant 69-year-old journalist and the passionate owner of Radio Haiti Inter. For decades, he used his microphone to ruthlessly expose government corruption, fight for the rights of poor farmers, and call out corporate greed. He had survived dictatorships, assassinations attempts, and forced exiles, always returning to his beloved microphone. But as the hot Caribbean sun began to rise on Monday, April 3rd, 2000, Jean was completely unaware that a meticulously coordinated trap had been laid out for him. At around 6:05 a.m., Jean pulled his car into the gravel parking lot of the Radio Haiti Inter station offices. Sitting inside the station lobby, preparing to open the doors for the day's broadcast, was a dedicated 20-year-old station employee named Jean Claude Louissaint. Neither man knew that these would be the final, fleeting moments of their lives. The second Jean Dominique stepped out of his vehicle to grab his leather briefcase, the silence of the morning was shattered. A lone, masked gunman stepped out from the foliage near the station gate, moving with a cold, professional precision. Without uttering a single word, the assassin raised a firearm and opened fire directly on the legendary journalist. Jean was struck multiple times in the chest and neck, collapsing instantly onto the gravel driveway. Hearing the deafening cracks of gunfire, young Jean Claude Louissaint rushed toward the front entrance of the office building in a brave, desperate attempt to see what was happening or help his boss. Tragically, the gunman turned his weapon toward the doorway, firing repeatedly. Jean Claude was struck down in the doorway, mortally wounded. The assassin ran to a waiting getaway vehicle and sped off into the chaotic labyrinth of Port-au-Prince traffic. Station staff rushed outside to a scene of absolute devastation. Both men were hurried to a local hospital, but the damage was too severe. Jean Dominique and Jean Claude Louissaint were pronounced dead, sending a massive shockwave of grief and righteous fury across the entire nation of Haiti. Thousands of citizens flooded the streets, mourning the loss of the voice that had spoken for them when no one else would. The investigation into the double murder at Radio Haiti Inter should have been a top priority. Instead, what followed was a textbook case of political obstruction, systemic intimidation, and a trail of blood designed to keep the truth buried forever. Detectives immediately suspected that Jean's assassination was a political hit ordered by high-level figures whose deep financial corruption he had been actively exposing on the airwaves. But every time a judge or an investigator began pulling on a thread, they were met with extreme political pressure, death threats, and sudden reassignments. The case folder became a dangerous entity that no one in law enforcement wanted to touch. Then, the witnesses and suspects themselves began disappearing in deeply suspicious ways. At least two individuals identified as key suspects in the planning of the assassination died under bizarre, sudden circumstances before they could ever be fully interrogated by the courts. Later, against all odds, 3 other men were successfully indicted and held in a secure prison facility awaiting trial. But before they could step foot into a courtroom to testify about who had paid them, a highly coordinated prison break occurred. The 3 indicted suspects escaped from custody, vanishing into the wind and leaving Jean's widow, Michelle Montas, and the family of Jean Claude without a shred of legal justice. Just 22 days after the tragedy in Haiti, another terrifying act of targeted violence played out thousands of miles away in Europe highlighting the exact same ruthless methodology. We shift our focus to the stark, historic streets of Belgrade, Serbia. By the spring of 2000, Serbia was navigating an incredibly tense, dark period of political transitions and economic sanctions. At the center of the nation's major commercial interests was Žika Petrović, a highly influential 60-year-old business executive who served as the powerful CEO of Jet Airways, the country's national flag carrier. Žika was a man who held the keys to massive financial accounts, corporate logistics, and intimate knowledge of the elite class's economic dealings. On the evening of April 25, 2000, Žika drove to a quiet, residential neighborhood in Belgrade to visit his elderly parents. He parked his car and walked toward the front entrance of their home. But as he reached the gate, two masked men stepped out from the damp darkness of the alleyway. Without a word, they drew automatic weapons and fired a barrage of shots at close range. Žika Petrović was killed instantly right in front of his parents' property. The masked executioners disappeared into the Belgrade night, leaving behind no physical evidence, no witnesses, and a corporate empire frozen in absolute terror. The killers of Žika Petrović were never identified, and his file remains one of Serbia's most notorious, heavily debated cold cases. Many believe his execution was directly tied to high-level financial secrets or corporate resistance against corrupt political entities trying to siphon funds from the national airline. When we look at the lives of Jean Dominique, Jean Claude Louissaint, and Žika Petrović, we are reminded of the immense, terrifying price that is often paid by those who hold power or microphones in environments governed by fear. These men were pillars of their respective worlds, cut down by entities that believed they could assassinate an idea or bury a secret with a bullet. But the reality is, even when the legal system fails, when suspects escape, and when files grow cold, the truth possesses a survival instinct of its own. Jean Dominique's voice still echoes through the recordings of Radio Haiti Inter, inspiring a new generation of journalists to speak truth to power. Their stories remind us that our freedom and our access to the truth are fragile gifts, protected only by the sheer courage of those willing to stand on the front lines. I want to know what you guys think about these two profound cases. How do we as a global community support and protect the independent voices that risk everything to expose corruption? Let's talk about it down in the comments, and please keep the discussion deeply respectful of the lives lost. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. Take care of yourselves, look out for one another, and I'll see you in the next dive. Bye.